I found out about my wife's, now ex-affair, the day she was hospitalized. Years later, she still cannot accept my engagement. If there were an award for the worst way to find out your spouse was cheating, I would take home the gold. No contest. Like many unfortunate souls before me, I was suddenly initiated into a club that nobody ever wants to belong to. I will never forget the panic in my ex-sister in Law's voice as she kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over again while I drove home from a week-long work trip. I had no clue what she was talking about, but after a moment of trying to calm her down, she finally told me that my wife was in the hospital and that I needed to get home immediately. My mind was spinning. I was trying to get more details while making sure I didn't wrap my car around a tree as I sped home. The only thing she managed to say was that it was an assault, and then she hung up. Wouldn't pick up when I called back. Let me give some background. My ex-wife Sarah and I met in our mid-20s at a barbecue, introduced by a mutual friend. At first, she seemed almost unreal stunning, quiet, the kind of woman who didn't fight to be the center of attention. It took some time for us to start dating, but when we finally did, I felt like the luckiest man alive. The first time we tried to be intimate, she suddenly broke down crying. That should have been a red flag, but I didn't know any better. I panicked, thinking I had done something wrong, but the next day, she apologized and explained. Before she met me, she had been in a long-term relationship with a guy who was abusive emotionally, physically, and mentally. He tore her down during sex and then pretended to love her afterward. That night, she had a flashback. She told me it had nothing to do with me, that she was still in therapy, and that she just needed time. I loved her, so I believed that if we worked through it, we would only come out stronger. For a while, I was right. A year later, we got engaged. That was also the first time we were truly intimate. Things seemed to be moving in the right direction. I was even able to buy us a house thanks to an inheritance from my late uncle. Things were good. So good that I suggested we plant a peach tree in the backyard to symbolize new beginnings. She thought it was a beautiful idea. We got married soon after, and I swear, for a while, it felt perfect. Sure, we had normal ups and downs, but she always made sure we never went to bed angry. She would gently bring up anything that bothered her, and we worked through it like partners. Then life happened. I got a promotion. It meant more money, but also meant more travel for work conferences and meetings. That was when I started noticing changes in her. She seemed distant, less affectionate. She guarded her phone like it held the nuclear codes and stopped bringing up little things that annoyed her, which was strange because she used to. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed it off, saying it was just a phase. She needed some space, some girl time with her sister. I had no reason not to believe her, so I let it go. That phone call I got, that was the night she was supposed to be staying with her sister. I remember running into the hospital, breathless, demanding to know where she was. That was when the most patient, understanding police officer I have ever met sat me down and told me he needed to explain what had happened. He said he was a friend of my sister-in-law and happened to respond to a domestic disturbance call. He said when he arrived, he found a man on top of a woman, punching her. She was screaming, clawing at him, trying to fight back. I remember shaking my head, telling him there was no way this involved my wife. We were married, and everyone who knew her knew she would never ever be in a situation like that. He gave me a long look, then placed a hand on my shoulder and told me to stay calm because that woman, the one getting beaten, was Sarah. If the situation hadn't been so serious, I might have laughed in his face. But something about his expression told me that this was real. A nurse took me to see her, and when I walked in, I swear my entire world tilted. Her face was unrecognizable. Her jaw was fractured, one eye swollen completely shut, half of her face covered in deep bruises, 3 broken ribs, and then the doctor hit me with another gut punch. She was pregnant. I was still trying to make sense of everything when I saw her sister standing there. She wouldn't even look at me at first, but after some pressure from the officer, she finally told me the truth. 5 months earlier, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Jake, had contacted her out of nowhere. He told her he was working through a redemption process, trying to make amends with the people he had hurt. Anybody else's bullshit meter going off right now? She fell for it. At first, it was just talking. Then he convinced her to meet for coffee so he could show her how much he had changed. It was not long before that turned into an emotional affair. And when she went to her sister for advice, her sister told her to take it slow and get it out of her system, which of course led to a full-blown affair 3 months later. Her sister actually encouraged it, telling her she should make peace with the past in whatever way she needed. She even covered for her a few times so she could sneak off to see him. By the time my sister-in-law was telling me all this, she was crying, saying she had no idea about the abuse. She swore up and down that my wife had never told anyone but me and her therapist about what she had gone through. I felt nothing. No rage, no sadness, no grief. Just complete and utter emptiness. When Sarah finally woke up, I was sitting right there. The second she saw me, she broke down sobbing. The next few months were a blur. I was on autopilot, just going through the motions of life. Her family pushed hard for counseling both for her individually and for us as a couple. And in those sessions, she laid everything out. She admitted to what she had done and how much she hated herself for the pain she had caused me. She told me that, at one point, after leaving his place, she had actually thought about driving into a river because she could still smell him on her and felt like she was bringing something toxic back to me. Somehow, that was supposed to make me feel better. She swore she had tried to cut things off, but she had been too weak. It was only when she found out she was pregnant that she realized how truly messed up everything had gotten. That was when she decided to meet him one last time to end things for good. That was when he snapped and beat her half to death. After that, she was barely the same person. It was like a piece of her had been ripped away. She became terrified of being alone with any man except me. She could not even use the bathroom at night unless I was standing right outside the door. It was pathetic. After the baby was born, Hay was a boy. By the way, we got a paternity test. He was mine, but none of that changed the fact that every time I looked at her, I did not see my wife anymore. I saw what was left of her after him. I could not shake the disgust I felt. And that scared me. I knew if I stayed, I would end up doing something I would regret. I did not want to become like the man who had once tormented her. So I left. She begged me not to go. She even said I could have a free pass to sleep with whoever I wanted. Hell, she even told me I could hit her if it would make me feel better. That was when I knew I had to get out. To her credit, she made the divorce easy. She moved back in with her parents, agreed to a well-thought-out co-parenting plan, and never once tried to fight me on anything. Life went on. 3 years later, I met my fiancé completely by accident. I was at a bookstore with my buddy, arguing about Egyptian mythology, when this beautiful woman walked up and corrected my pronunciation of some of the gods and cities. She was Egyptian herself, and brilliant, and funny, and I was hooked immediately. We exchanged numbers, started dating, and before long, I knew she was the one. When I finally proposed, I did it in front of the peach tree I had planted all those years ago. But before I could even get an answer, she ran inside, came back with a ring of her own, and proposed right back. Turns out, she had been planning to ask me too, because, in her words, she was madly in love with me and did not want to risk losing me. My son was there to see it all. In all his innocent excitement, he ran straight to his mother and told her everything. That same night, Sarah showed up at my house in the pouring rain, screaming at me about how I could do this to her, how I could propose to another woman in front of our tree, how this was not the end of us. I am exhausted. I cannot completely cut her off. She is the mother of my child, but she is harassing me and my fiancé. How do I get her to let go, to move on, without having to file for a restraining order? I am seriously at my wit's end. Edit, I wanted to ask the women here something that has been gnawing at me for years. Why would she even want the attention of the man who destroyed her? How could she go back to him, even for a second? Even if she hated him? Even if she knew he was bad for her, why? Edit, forgot to mention something in the original post. When my fiancé gave me the ring she had planned to propose with, I noticed something engraved on the inside. It said, "To my pharaoh." Damn, I love this woman. Update. I found out my wife's, now ex-affair the day she was admitted to the hospital. Now, years later, she still cannot accept my engagement to my fiancé. I never expected this kind of response. Thank you to everyone who reached out, whether to support me, share their own experiences, or offer advice. It is eye-opening and honestly disheartening to realize that my situation is not unique. Seeing how many people have lived through something similar makes it clear how much damage betrayal can leave behind. But I am also relieved to know that healing is possible. Now, for what has happened since my last posts. First, a huge thank you to Mama, 20,245, for the simple but genius advice. It saved us a lot of stress. My son's birthday was coming up, and he told us he wanted a camping night. This kid loves the outdoors. Hiking, camping, running through the woods like he is a character in an adventure movie, lives for it. Because of everything going on, we could not go to our usual camping spot, so I offered up the backyard. Then came the unexpected request. He wanted his mom to stay over too. He had this whole picture in his head of us sitting on either side of him, roasting marshmallows together, just like a scene from one of his favorite shows. I wanted to do right by him, but there was no way I was sharing a tent with my ex. Even though my fiancée was understanding, I could tell she was not thrilled about the idea either. My ex, however, took full advantage of the situation. She kept going on about how excited she was to spend the night with her 2 men and even bought enough camping gear to supply a survivalist for a year. She was laying it on thick, making sure my fiancé knew exactly what was happening. I had to shut it down a couple of times, but she finally backed off when I told her I would invite her sister. Ever since our divorce, she has had nothing but hatred for her sister. She knows she is to blame for what happened in our marriage, but she refuses to forgive her sister for leading her down the wrong path and encouraging the affair. It is bad enough that she barely lets her sister see our son, which has been devastating for her. At one point, it even pushed her into a deep depression. She has been trying to make peace with my ex for years, but it just keeps getting worse. Anyway, back to the camping situation. Mama 20,245 gave me an easy but effective idea to get a multi-room tent so my fiancé could be part of the night too. Problem solved. I ran out and bought one that same day. My ex was not happy, but at least she was under the same roof as me for the night, so she considered it a win. My son, though, he was over the moon. He spent the whole day running around, pretending he was an explorer discovering new lands. That evening, I got the fire going while my ex brought out the marshmallows. He sat between us, roasting his marshmallow with the biggest grin on his face. Then something happened that I did not see coming. After we finished taking pictures and making s'mores, he handed my fiancée a stick, gave her a marshmallow, and sat next to her instead to make another one. It was such a small, innocent thing, but it hit me hard. Somehow, out of the absolute disaster of a marriage I had, out of all the pain and regret, came this. Something pure, something good. Later that night, my ex pulled me aside and asked to talk. We stepped into the kitchen and she apologized. Not for everything, just for the way she acted when I proposed. She admitted that, in her mind, I am still her husband, that no matter how much time passes, she cannot let go of the idea of us. She said she is terrified of me moving on, of my heart belonging to someone else.